A friend posted an image that discussed the importance of Psalms 118:8. It claims that Psalms 118 is the middle chapter of the entire Bible and that verse 8 is the middle verse of the entire Bible. Now, I understood the math on how they came up with Psalms 118 being the middle chapter, but the way they decided that Psalms 118:8 was the middle verse of the entire Bible made no rational sense to me. So I decided to do the calculation for myself. You may not find this interesting, but bear with me. I promise there is a point to all of this. I created a spreadsheet and I listed the books of the Bible in the first column. The second column, I listed the chapters. The third column, I documented the number of verses in each chapter. First from the NIV Bible, then from the original Hebrew Greek Bible. Because there are slight differences in the number of verses from one Bible version to another, but I believe it was in the 4th century at the Council of Nicaea that the Bible was given the order we have today. The Hebrew Old Testament had the books of the Bible in a different order than what we're familiar with, and the chapters and verses was done between the 13th and 16th centuries. But for the sake of this study, I'm going to leave it in the order that we're familiar with to determine the middle verses of the Hebrew Greek Bible. I wasn't too concerned with the claim that Psalms 118 was the middle chapter. How they came to that conclusion made sense to me. The claim is that there are 594 chapters before and after Psalms 118. So assuming they're correct, then Psalms 118 would be the middle chapter. To determine the middle verse, I needed to determine how many total verses there are in the Bible before I could conclude that Psalm 118:8 is or isn't the middle verse of the entire Bible. Well, after documenting all the books, the chapters, and the verses, I could then answer the questions raised by this claim. And here's what I found. There are 66 books in the Bible, which was no surprise. There are 1,189 chapters, including Psalms 118, which would be no surprise since that was the claim. I also concluded that there are 31,136 verses in the Hebrew Greek Bible. There are 31,102 verses in the NIV Bible. And since there are an even number of verses in both, then no single verse is a center verse of either Bible. So dividing these numbers in half tells me where the central verses are. So in the Hebrew Greek Bible, there are 15,568 verses in each half. The NIV, 15,551. So now I can determine what verses are in the middle of the entire Bible. So in the Hebrew Greek, it's Psalms 102, 15, and 16. The NIV, Psalms 103, 1 and 2. Not Psalms 118:8. It didn't really surprise me that Psalms 118:8 did not end up being the middle verse. There was one thing that did surprise me, though. And I triple-checked it to verify that I was right, and then I checked it again. Psalms 118 is not the middle chapter of the entire Bible as claimed. It turns out Psalms 117 is the middle chapter. Since there are, in fact, 1,189 chapters, the middle chapter is the 595th chapter. And that happens to be Psalms 117, not 118. So in both the Hebrew Greek Bible and the NIV Bible, the shortest chapter in the Bible is the middle chapter of the entire Bible. Now we can take this new information and ask the question, does the central verse have an important message? Does the central chapter have an important message? Well, let's look at both Bibles. First, take a look at the middle chapter, Psalms 117. Praise the Lord, all you nations. Extol him, all you peoples. For great is his love toward us, and the faithfulness of the Lord endures forever. Praise the Lord. Now look at the central verses of the NIV, Psalms 103, 1 and 2. Praise the Lord, O my soul. All my inmost being, praise his holy name. Praise the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. What is the central theme of these? Well, Psalm 117, praise the Lord, all ye nation. Psalms 103, 1 and 2, praise the Lord, O my soul. So if you've watched my previous video on purpose of life, you will remember that I said we were created to praise the Lord. This seems to be the central theme of the Bible. Look at what the Hebrew Greek Bible says in the middle verses, Psalms 102, 15 and 16. But to keep it in context, I'll read through to verse 23. Keep in mind that Psalms 117 and 103 tells us to praise the name of the Lord. So starting with Psalms 102:15. The nations will fear the name of the Lord. All the kings of the earth will revere your glory. For the Lord will rebuild Zion and appear in his glory. He will respond to the prayer of the destitute. He will not despise their plea. Now pay close attention to this next part, verses 18 through 22. It says, let this be written for a future generation, that a people not yet created may praise the Lord. The Lord looked down from his sanctuary on high. From heaven he viewed the earth to hear the groans of the prisoners and release those condemned to death. So the name of the Lord will be declared in Zion and his praise in Jerusalem when the peoples and the kingdoms assemble to worship the Lord. And in verse 23, in the course of my life, he broke my strength. He cut short my days. It says in verse 15 and 16, the nations will fear the name of the Lord. All the kings of the earth will revere your glory, for the Lord will rebuild Zion and appear in his glory. This is all future tense to the writer. At the time of this writing, Zion is referring to the city of David, Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount. And since it says that the Lord will rebuild Zion, this must have been written after it was destroyed. Psalms 102 tells us in verse 1 that this chapter is about a prayer of an afflicted man when he is faint and pours out his lament before the Lord. In Psalms 102, 13 and 14, it suggests that if the people of Israel will return to loving the city of Jerusalem and the land of Israel, then the Lord will redeem them and destroy their enemies. The destruction of Zion may be referring to the first destruction by Babylon. It was destroyed a second time in 70 AD by the Romans, and to this day the temple has not been rebuilt. And when it is talking about a future generation, a people not yet created, it could be talking about the people of Israel that returned from Babylon and rebuilt the city and the temple. So I don't want to take this out of context, but in verse 23, talking to the future generations, it says, he cut short my days. What I do want to do is I want to draw a parallel with this verse and what we are going through today, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We read throughout the Bible where it tells Israel that those that bless you will be blessed. Those that curse you will be cursed. Example, Genesis 12:3, Numbers 24:9, Genesis 27:9, Zechariah 12:9, Psalms 122:6, just to list a few. I feel like Biden has stopped supporting Israel and instead has enabled their enemies. Since Biden has stepped into the president's office, the United States has turned its back on Israel. Now, don't get me wrong, there have been other presidents in the past that didn't support Israel, but this time it seems extreme and very blatant. I'm not going to get political. I'm just drawing a parallel to what's going on in the world today with the Bible. Look at Psalms 122:23 again. In the course of my life, he broke my strength. He cut short my days. Compare that to Matthew 24:22. If those days had not been cut short, no one would have survived. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Matthew 24 is talking about the last days when Christ returns. It's talking about the rapture of the church. Look what it says in verse 19. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Imagine a nursing mother when the rapture comes and she's not ready. The baby's taken and she's left behind. Imagine a pregnant woman when the rapture comes and she's not ready. The baby is taken from her womb and she is left behind. Think about that. If that baby in her womb is not a human being with a soul, then why would Christ take it? Imagine the wrath of God over the abortion of innocent babies. I'm just saying. God will shorten our days and take his bride home, because if he doesn't, no one will survive. In my previous video on the New Covenant, I talk about Christ's return. He is coming soon, and our days will be cut short by the rapture. As a nation, we have turned our back on Israel and on God. I don't know if there is anything we can do to be redeemed or that we deserve to. But if there is, it can only be that we return to worshiping God and that we love Jerusalem and the land of Israel. This is the central theme of the Bible. If that never happens, then we must all be ready for the coming. And if not, we won't survive his wrath. Are the middle verses significant? Is the middle chapter significant? I would say yes, they are. I'd go so far as to say that they are even prophetic. But I want to leave you with one last thought. Ezekiel 14, 13 and 14. It says, Son of man, if a country sins against me by being unfaithful, and I stretch out my hand against it to cut off its food supply and send famine upon it, and kill its men and their animals, even if these three, Noah, Daniel, and Job, were in it, they could save only themselves by their righteousness, declares the sovereign Lord. If God chooses to stretch out his hand against the United States, we had better be ready for our days to be cut short, or we will not survive. I can only save myself by my righteousness. I can't drag you along with me. You can only save yourself. So you must decide for yourself, and when Christ returns in the rapture, there will be no second chances.